Hey guys, JP here. I am the founder of the Host Network, which is our global Airbnb community. And I'm the founder of PureStay, which is my Airbnb management company. We currently manage around 60 Airbnb properties. And in this video, I want to talk to you about how I built my entire business from 0 to 100K per calendar month. That's a gross number, by the way. And we're doing about £40,000 net per month. So I'm going to walk you through the pain, the problems, the mindset shifts that I've had to make over the years, and we'll see where we're at today. So I want you to follow also down here. I've written this column gross, which is gross income. So each property we on board or each bit of money that we bring in, I want to document that here, and then equally a net column, and then the cost to me. So if you're a beginner, let's say you're absolutely starting from zero, this is my version of starting from zero. I wish I had this video when I started so I could follow this along. Now, I'm going to take you back all the way. So that is what I'm going to talk about, all the way to 2019. This is pre-COVID era. So those who remember the pre-COVID era, life was good. 2019, I'd got to my point where I knew that I needed to start a business. I knew I had property experience. My previous life was architectural assistant. So I had this background with property. I'd done a few buy-to-lets, but nothing was sticking, nothing was gelling. In 2019, I decided to go all in. And this is the first thing I want to talk to you about. The first thing is a mindset shift. I want to say that for years before this day, I was going to do it. I was like thinking about getting into Airbnb. I was thinking about getting into property. Again, like I'd done things with my mum. We'd done a couple of buy-to-lets in Bradford, renovations, all that. People used to think I was an expert. I absolutely was not. So I was kind of this fake property guy in 2017, 2018, where everyone would talk to me about it and I would just be like, yeah, you want to do this? And then I'd not done it myself. So I made the shift, and it was a mindset shift to commit from I want to and I know I should do to sod this, I've got to do it. I've got to do it because, you know, time is ticking, number one, and I feel like a failure and I feel like a bit of a fraud. So for me, the mindset shift was big. Tony Robbins was a huge help. David Goggins was an even bigger help. And just getting into the fact that if I'm just talking bullshit, to call bullshit quickly with myself. So when the mindset shift happened, I very clearly knew Airbnb, that's where I want to go. How did I know that? I just knew I wanted to get into property, and I started to submerge myself in, or should I say, immerse myself in books. The first book someone gave me actually was Simon Zucchi's Property Magic, which talks explicitly about HMOs. And I was like, this is ace. I'm going to do HMOs, right? So the first book, Simon Zucchi's, it was really good. Why? Because it then got me to some live events that Simon did. These were free live events, whether they were online, like things were in person back before COVID. So I would do these like half-day events. And in 2019, I probably covered the country just to network and to immerse myself in education. So I'm going to say the first thing I did was a mindset shift. The second thing I did was network like crazy. I didn't know what networking meant. I just stood in a room really awkwardly and says, yeah, I'm going to get into property. I know a bit, and I try to sort of fake it till you make it. I could talk a good game just because I put myself in front of people and say, yeah, I'm thinking about getting into this, but I don't really know why. Or I'm thinking about getting into this, and it would be service accommodation, it would be HMO, it would be something like that. Other than books, I did a lot of podcasts. I used to listen to like this Airbnb podcast with, I actually can't remember, it was two guys. I'll reference it in the video. It was two guys. So I used to be walking to my events job. So I was still working with Samsung events at that point. And I remember listening, it was sunny day on my way into Shepherd's Bush, into Westfield to work, listening to this thing and just going, oh my God, time is ticking. I've got to get on this service accommodation thing. Still in 2009, I had nothing. I'd made the decision, books, podcasts, networking. And as you can tell, once the mindset shift, once a mindset shift happens, you got to immerse. So that will lead to immersion. And immersion is just, you wake up thinking about it, you go to bed thinking about it, every spare second on your break from work, after work, before work, even if you're not working, every thought, every spare second is, I'm doing this thing, how am I going to do it, right? So hopefully if that's you watching this now, this is going to be helpful for you. So podcast, books, network, and YouTube. Yeah, that's how I learned. That's how I learned in 2019. I was just immersed. So from this, I made a decision to go service accommodation, Airbnb. And I was flirting with this idea about HMO. And I quickly realized throughout 2019, throughout this process, HMO, not for me. I'm not going to go into that too much because that's a separate YouTube video that I'll save for later. Okay. So where did I commit and how did I commit? Well, somewhere around early 2019, I was sat in Starbucks drinking 99p filter coffee for about 2 months, and I was just immersing myself. I had nothing, and I had about £5,000 in my bank. Okay, in my HSBC personal account, I had about £5,000. Now, this is probably one of the most amounts of money I've ever had in my bank account before then. And the reason is I used to do events. Like I said, I was a contractor and I would just work for someone like Samsung, and we do these big events, really cool, really good fun, and they'd pay really well. So at this point, I'd managed to save about 5 grand. I was living a very low-cost lifestyle. My property that I was in, I owned, and it was tiny, and the mortgage is less than 200 quid. So you're getting the idea. I'm living in Bradford at this point. Let's start. How did I build my entire business from 0 to 100K per calendar month? Well, you can see before I even started, there was a shift. Mindset shift, immersion into books, network, podcasts, and YouTube, learning about HMO, learning about service accommodation, and learning about everything to do with being an entrepreneur, and also everything to do with being a highly disciplined individual, I suppose, because I just wasn't. I was really not at this point. I had this sort of obsession, but I also had this excuse-driven culture within me that, like, that's not happening because, or you know, I can't afford that because I don't have the money, or I don't have this. It was like coming from a really negative, maybe negative is not the right word, but like a mindset where I needed and I didn't have, like a, can't think of the word. Anyway, skip forward to mid-2019. So now I remember it being around June 2019. My friend at the time became my JV, became my business partner. Just came in and was like, yeah, this sounds really good. I could talk an excellent game at this point. I didn't have anything, but I had an idea, right? And that idea he wanted to buy into. And he said, JP, I've got about, I think he had about £30,000. And he says, I'm willing to invest that into the business. Obviously, as a director, he would get it back. I didn't really know what he was talking about, but I was like, yeah, cool. Okay, this sounds good. That's going to allow us, in my limited knowledge at the time, to probably buy a house somewhere. Okay, so in June 2019, my JV, or my business partner, joined the business, and we had our first business, which was Property 62 Group, right? I then decided, through my knowledge that I'd collected here, that I've got to pull the trigger. And the first thing I did, so the first thing was to source a deal. I thought, wow, I could find a serviced accommodation, i.e. find a landlord that's willing to sign a piece of paper to say, there you go, JP, you can now find someone else that's going to run this property of mine as a service accommodation. And all as that landlord wanted was his rent every month, or her rent every month, and of course for us to look after it, okay? So I was like, that's easy, I can do that. I'm going to source a deal. The big problem was, that I hadn't realized, is I had to use, that's my landline phone. I had to pick up the phone. I had to pick up the phone every day, all day, and I hate it. And I probably picked up the phone twice a day because I was that bad and that insecure about being on the phone, speaking to agents that I'd never spoken to. I just avoided it. Now, I was really, really good typing emails. That's my laptop. So I was cold calling. I should have been cold calling. Let's say, you know, I mean, how many 8 hours? If you're going to do 8-hour workday, you could probably do a bunch of calls per hour, right? I was doing 2 a day. I was doing 2 a day because I was terrible on the phone. I hated the phone. I'm still not a massive fan of it, but I hated it. However, emails, I could hide behind this thing. So I was sending maybe 50 a day. That was my secret sauce. And it wasn't just emails. I would do the following. So let me come this side. So I was now sourcing a deal. If you don't know what sourcing a deal means, like I said, you find a landlord, you find a person that wants to take on a property, and you match them together and you get paid. And you usually get paid from doing all of these networking and free education things. I realized you could get paid £3,000. So I was like, ooh, this is good. I've only got this in my bank. I'm now not working anymore. I need to get some money in the bank. And with this one, I reckon I had about 3 months, 4 months of living. And when I say living, I then had a credit card that had nothing on it, but had a 0% offer, like an amount of money that if I really ran out of money, I could borrow against it. So I probably had 10 grand somewhat available to me, which in my sort of lazy, relaxed mind, I was like, that's loads of time. That's loads of time. But because I was like nailed on because of this mindset shift, I was all in. And my first goal was to get £3,000 through a source deal. So I had to make a load of phone calls, which I was terrible at. So I didn't do any of that. And I had to send a load of emails So I would either email the agent, okay, and get zero back because they must have got loads of these emails and they didn't know who I was. Or I would email Open Rent, like send a message to landlords on Open Rent. And Open Rent's changed its rules a little bit now. You can still do it, but it's changed slightly. But it hadn't back then. So I would just be messaging landlords going, hey, I really like this property, can I come and view it? Or I'd be going, hey, I really like this property. Would you be open to a corporate let agreement where we rent the property for 5 years and we do service accommodation? La, 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 la. And I was just trying all of these different ways of sending these messages out of, let's say, 50 a day. So that's 250 per week. If you're doing 5 days a week, I'd probably get 2 responses. I'd probably get 2 responses. And those 2 responses, no, they weren't no's because you did get some no's as well that would just do it by clicking the button. I'll probably get 2 responses. They're like, yeah, okay, I'm interested in having a conversation. Oh God, now it means I've got to do this bit. So then I'd have to pick up the phone and I would stutter and blubber and just feel the sweat. Like, I just hated this bit. I hated it so much. But I got an agent that was like, come and see me. Let me fill in this gap. As I realized I wanted to be a sourcer, I continued to go networking. And I used to stand up at things like the PIN meetings, which again is Simon Zucci in Property Magic, that book that I mentioned. I used to stand up at the PIN meetings and go, hey, I'm JP, I'm sourcing serviced accommodation properties. So if you want to have a property, come and speak to me. And then before I knew it, I'd like 10 people coming to talk to me. And I'm thinking, shit, I genuinely don't even know what I'm doing. But I know I'm going to source you a deal. So now I've committed and I've got these 10 people. Obviously, I don't remember how much it was. But what I would do is I would take their phone number and I'd take their email and I'd say, what's your location that you want properties in? That's all I needed. And then I'd get on a call with them. These were different. I could call these guys because I'd already met them. I just the cold calling I really hated. So I'd now built, with sourcing, I built my investor list. Okay, it wasn't anything fancy. It was my notebook with some names and some numbers and some emails in and some locations in. But I had investors to sell the deals that I could now source to. So this is very, very basic. I'm not saying start this way, by the way, but this is where I started. And this is my version of how I got from 0 to 100K. Cut a long story short, I managed to sell my first 3 deals, not all in quick succession. It took me about 3 months to sell 3 deals. And I realized this works. All of these property guys, these books, these podcasts and YouTube, they're not lying, it works. But it also took me a shit ton of work and a shit ton of time to get $3,000 in my account, which don't get me wrong, was still a nice salary. But I was like, okay, I'm not gonna change and I'm not creating passive income doing this. So after I realized that I'd sold 3 deals and somewhat got about £9,000, I said to myself, the next deal, I'm keeping. The next deal, I'm gonna keep. It's gonna be for me. So let me just tidy this up. Yeah, so source deal, I made £9,000, but that doesn't count because it's not recurring monthly. So that £9,000 just went in my bank and it fed me for 3 months or longer, paid my mortgage and all of that stuff. Then I realized I need to keep the next property. And this is where the journey really began. I need to keep the next property. So if you don't know what this strategy is, yes, it's Airbnb, but we haven't really got to that stage yet because we're still in the rent to rent. This is rent to rent. This is where you rent a landlord's property to then rent it out again. Now, this is not bound by Airbnb. This could be a HMO, this could be social housing, this could be rent to rent. I could literally put another AST in there. I could rent it for £1,000 and I could put a £1,200 AST in there if I really wanted to. Why? I probably don't even know why, because you would never do that. You want to earn money and you need a decent margin. But I was now in the rent to rent game and I didn't really realize it too much. Again, I'd heard about it. I'd been spoken to or in free training workshops about rent to rent. So I had this idea and I'd managed to get my hands on an agreement, a contract from somebody online for about 500 quid. So I paid the money, I got this agreement, and then I could adjust and amend this first agreement. So by the way, there was no ChatGPT then, so you couldn't just make a contract in seconds. So Airbnb, rent to rent, I'm gonna keep the next property. I then I got an opportunity from the same agent that was one of the ones that emailed me back. He said, JP, I've got 2 flats. I've got 2 flats and they're in Leamington Spa. This is where this guy was based. This is two and a bit hours away from where I was living, right? So Leamington Spa, I knew it from my event days, really beautiful place. This came about because one of my source deal clients wanted a property in Leamington Spa. I then built these relationships with agents. Now, I built these relationships with agents, yes, by sending that first email and getting a response, then getting on the phone, but I actually went into their office and I am so much better in person. I just smile and have a chat, talk about the weather, talk about the football, whatever. So I built this relationship with this guy called Michael. Really, really cool guy. He was willing to somewhat be open to other strategies. He was willing to, dare I say, bend the rules a little bit, because you get a lot of agents that just go, no, we don't do that. And as a company, they didn't do it. But Michael saw the opportunity. And the opportunity at that time was, hey, Michael, you can no longer charge, this is a bit of technical knowledge for you. You don't really need to know this, but you can no longer charge your tenants that you sign up on an AST. You can't charge them anymore. The government wiped that out. But you can charge when I take it on SA. You can charge me a fee. And Michael's eyes lit up. He was like, oh my God, JP, I'm going to charge you £600 per property that I give you. And I was like, sound, because I can either sell it for £3,000, making a net of 2.5 grand, or 600, 500 quid, whatever, I can put it in my rent to rent pot, and then my journey is starting and it's money well spent. Michael's happy, I was happy. And that's how I got my first 2 flats. So these 2 flats in Leamington Spa were 2 bedroom, okay? 2 bedroom. One of them had like a kitchen, big kitchen, and then a separate lounge. And then the other one was just a straight 2 bedroom with open lounge, kitchen, diner. I'll put some pictures on so you can see it, right? They looked a mess. They were magnolia, they were dirty, they were everything I wanted because I got the keys. And I was like, yes, I didn't see the pain that was about to hit me for the next 3 months, genuinely. Then, so where am I at? I've now got keys and it is probably September 2019. And I've got the first 2 keys, September 2019. Bingo, the game has begun. Now what? I've got these magnolia, stinking, dirty flats. What have I got to do with them? And Michael's going, oh yeah, by the way, JP, you owe me rent. So the rent, top of my head, can't quite remember exactly. Let me think about this. The bigger one, in Michael's eyes, it was bigger, was 850. And the smaller one, I think, was 800. Something like that. Now I'm on the hook for that, plus deposits. Yeah, plus deposits, which was the same amount. So let's just do some quick maths. I was on the hook at this point. Bearing in mind, I'm now sat in an empty flat that's literally got nothing in it, magnolia, grubby. I'm 2 hours away from home. I'm buzzing because I've got the keys. And then I'm like shocked into what now? Literally, what now? And Michael's come knocking for $1,650 rent. And just for argument's sake, I think it was identical deposit. Because he was a traditional agent, he didn't want to do a rent deposit scheme. He didn't want to do a deposit insurance or anything like that, anything creative. He was like, no, you just put that deposit in our account. In fact, it was more than that because he took 5 weeks. But anyway, for simple maths, 3,300. Cost to me is 3,300, okay? I've got no income at this stage. This is where things get really sketchy. In the first few properties, do not make, you probably will, do not make the mistakes I made. I didn't have a plan to stage it because the next thing I'm faced with is to stage my properties. If you don't know what staging means, it's going from an empty property to one that is market ready, that is guest ready, that is like beds, sofas, TV, kettle, toaster, knives and forks, you name it. Everything's in, it's guest ready. That is the difference between a not staged and a staged properties. So my next step was to stage the properties. No prior experience. Yes, I did have a creative architectural background. I understood interiors. I got it. That bit was all very easy. I can imagine if I wasn't that person and I didn't have that, this would be a real headache, like a real headache. And I would have been knocking on someone else's door to say, help. When I got to the point of staging my properties, I thought, cool, this will be done in like a matter of weeks. It took me a total of 3 months. Why? Because I'm an idiot. Literally, it took me 3 months. I decorated the place on my own. I painted over the magnolia with white paint because I was like, it ain't staying magnolia. I'm a bit of a perfectionist. And I spent a load of time going through shops, going through lists online of which sofa to buy, what price it is there. Oh, now I've ordered, it's a 4-week delivery. And I was running the business doing like, trying to raise money, trying to raise finance because again, back to the networks, back to YouTube, back to the books, everyone's like, yeah, you got to raise money, you got to raise finance. So I was having these early conversations with people and I was building up my social media, posting on Facebook going, this is what I'm doing. And everyone's like, what the hell are you doing, JP? And I was like, I'm in Leamington Spa doing this property. It wasn't my priority to start staging my properties. It should have been, but it wasn't because I was still in that early stage of absolute fucking chaos when it came to my business. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I should be focused on. I've got a very creative sort of ADD brain anyway. So like, you know, to be in a new industry like property, there's so many colorful, shiny objects that I wanted to learn about. There's so many new people that I wanted to speak to. there's so many podcasts and books and YouTube videos that I wanted to watch and read and listen to. You can see how very quickly 3 months cost me now, let's just add another 1650 onto that, and just so I can do the maths, is about 4950. Yeah, so it's now not that, it's, actually I need to add 2 on 3, 3, 6, 6. I'm now 6.5 grand in because I'm an idiot, that's why. Don't take 3 months. Either pay someone to do it, this is another YouTube video altogether, but now pay someone to do it, or do it in a week, okay? There are ways to do it in a week. There are ways to do it in a day if you really want. So after 3 months, here's what's happened in that 3 months. Remember this amount of money, £30,000 that my, at that time, new business partner brought in. We decided to buy a house because we thought that's what you do. Of course, that's what you do, right? You want to get into property, you got to buy a house. So we used none of this money to do any of this, okay? So by default, my 5 grand has gone and my credit card is now open for business, okay? Because now I'm buying stuff. I'm buying furnishings, I'm staging the property. I bought a sofa from here, then I've done an IKEA trip times 10, then I've gone to B&M for some small bits. By now I'm spending money and we're both injecting more money into our director's loan. We're like, oh, we're quickly spending money here. Okay, we're quickly spending money. And I think Nick, at this time, put in another £10,000, okay? So I'm opening my credit card, I've depleted my funds, and now I'm going, wow, this has got to get live. At the same time, we were buying a house. We bought a house, this is bizarre, and what we did, I'll tell you exactly what we did. We had bought a house, and this was a funny story. We bought it in Doncaster, good old South Yorkshire. Why did we buy it in Doncaster? Because stupidly, I went to a Samuel Leeds event. Yeah, I went to a Samuel Leeds event. Really good event, by the way. Free, cost me £1. Well, it wasn't free, cost me £1. He said, if you're going to get into HMO, buy a house in Doncaster, it's going to be Article 4 in the next 6 months. So me and my business partner went, let's go do that. We had some money. We knew a broker. We actually ended up using the broker, different guy who sold us the house. We were proper beginners, proper novices. Now we had this terraced house in Doncaster and we were going to do HMO. We got the property purchased and we spent some money getting it compliant, and we probably spent somewhere in the region of £15,000 getting it compliant. It just needed fire doors, so all the door casings came off, doors went on, fire panel went in because it was 3-story. I'm pretty certain that was it. We did some upgrades to obviously decor and things like that, right? At this stage, I've now got 3 sets of keys, but we are draining cash fast. I do not want you to make this mistake. At this point, I've staged my first property and we're buying this, and this completed somewhat around Christmas. So from September to staging my properties, it's now Christmas and the first property went live. All as that means is I've furnished it, I've put cutlery in the drawer, a microwave, there's a TV on the wall, we've now signed up to the Wi-Fi. I'm virgin of drilled holes everywhere and put cables everywhere. Now I've got Wi-Fi, the TV's working, and there's linen on the beds, and we're good to go. And I was like, what the hell do we do? Like, what do? We give it to a management company. That's what we do. So the next, let me switch pens. So then what we did is we gave that property to a management company. And this is an SA management, okay? It's a bit wonky. We gave it to an SA management company because I had no clue what I was doing and we were hemorrhaging money. I'm gonna leave out the money that was Doncaster because that was the injection from my business partner. And that's a slightly different story to how we scaled the SA side of things, okay? However, what I won't leave out is what it cost us to stage the property. It probably cost around £5,000 in furniture alone. So I'm now not at 6, I'm now at 11,600. Geez, that's a lot of money. I'm 11,600 in. I only started with about 5 grand and an open credit card for about 5 grand. And now at this point, me and my business partner were like, uh-oh, we're running out of money. And we're running out of money quick. Because when you put a property live on Airbnb, especially in mid-December, it ain't gonna perform great. It ain't gonna perform great. You might get 1 or 2 quick bookings, but they'll be low value because we haven't figured out the pricing yet. Even though I had a management company, they were sort of, they were pretty good because they were pretty big, but they were slapdash with their details. So it was just online and it was the speed that impressed me. And I was like, oh my God, it's really live and it's exciting and it's cool, but I wasn't really making much money. It took me till end of January to get the second property ready. That was another I wouldn't say another 5 because I bought a lot in that first batch for both properties. You know, like when you buy a kettle, you buy 2 kettles, but it was probably another 2 grand. Plus it was another month of rent. So I'm gonna round this up to like 14K all in. You can see where we've gone wrong. Yeah, we took too long, massive problem. We took far too long. I staged it myself. I decorated it myself whilst living there on a sleeping bag, which I'll show you. And I was trying to hustle up and rustle up new business at the same time. Like, just do one thing, literally just do one thing. Anyway, Doncaster, back to there. It's now mid-February. And in February, we're ready to go as a HMO. And I had this wild idea. I was like, why don't we do it as a service accommodation? Like, I don't want to deal with HMO tenants anyway. I've always said I don't want to get into HMO. We only bought this thing. Oh yeah, I didn't tell you, because Samuel Leeds said it's going to be Article 4, sorry. It's going to be Article 4. You should buy a house in Doncaster and do it as a HMO, and then it will become more valuable when Article 4 smashes down on the area. Little did we know, our house wasn't in the Article 4 anyway. So we'd rush to get it ready, we'd rush to get it finished, and we'd rush to get like HMO compliant and do all the licensing. But just before we even started that process, one, we realized it was outside of the Article 4 area. All of this was just pointless. And I don't want to do a HMO. And luckily my business partner agreed, and he was like, okay, well, let's see if this service accommodation thing works in Doncaster. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. So what did we do? We gave this one to our management company. We had to furnish it to probably a more, I wouldn't say a higher standard because we were doing it anyway for HMO, but we had to furnish it to be able to put it on the service accommodation model. So I'm going to put in here another £5,000. We're now up to £19,000 with very, very little income. However, by March, we had 3 properties. I need to create some space. Let me create some space. So we sourced a deal. We kept the next few deals. We were then in the rent-to-rent market. I got 2 flats in Leamington Spa. In September 2019, I had these 2 keys, and then I started racking up these bills. I staged the first 2 properties myself. It took me way longer than it should have done. Genuinely did take me 3 months. That cost me a lot of money, time, and just stress. And then in the same effort, I remember being in Leamington Spa, covered in paint, in my paint gear. And because we were buying this house, I had to run to HSBC to do some form of like wet signature. And it had to be done that day for the funds to be released for the mortgage to buy it. So all of this was in a melting pot going on together. This was a wild, wild time. At the same point, here is when I met my girlfriend. Yeah, I met my girlfriend, who's now my fiance, and we get married in August 2026. So I don't know when you're watching this. Yeah, so all of this wilderness was all happening, and I felt alive, and I felt a little bit stressed. But because again, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, I knew that hustle, I'm making mistakes, and very costly mistakes, but just doing it was the way forward. So let me just, while I rub all this off, I just want to talk about the mindset, because there are so many people that will not even get started. And they'll be like, JP, you wasted, we're up at £19,000, yeah? We're up at £19,000. You wasted 19 grand, one, because you're an idiot and you thought you could paint and stage and do all of these things very quickly, which I couldn't, and stay focused, which I definitely couldn't. But over-analysing, it won't get them started. And the difference is, if you can find that middle ground of moving quickly to save this amount of money, delegating to get other people in where you need expertise, you need extra hands, you need help, so things move fast, but you can push yourself off the edge. That is the mindset shift that happened for me. I now was over the edge, and I was like, wow, I'm in deep. I'm in deep, but I can see the way out. And the way out at this point is I've got 2 flats in Leamington, and I got 1 house in Doncaster. This trusty little house in Doncaster cashed in. This went really, really popular. These started to grow, doing well, and the gross from these 2, back in the day, I think we put them on for about £180 on a weekend, £100 or £90 on the weekday, and we averaged it out about £130. Let's just say £130, working on a 70% occupancy. I think that gave us about 3 grand. Let me just do that sum. 22 times 130 is, so the reason I do 22 is because 30 nights would be like 100%, 70% is around 22 nights of the month, and the average that we sold the nights for was about 130, and it gives us 2860. So just for easy numbers, I'm going to round it up to 3K. Okay, I'm going to say that's 3K. This fluctuates a lot and this fluctuates a lot, but just on average, it was about 3K. So now in our gross column, I'm just going to rub out the word immersion. Now in our gross column, I got 2 of these. So that's 6,000 gross from 2 properties. How many properties? That's a weird shape, that's a house. Each one probably netted about 800 each, okay? From a rent to rent side of things. After management, after bills, after rent, after costs, it netted around £800 each, okay? This fluctuates. You could find the average at £1,000. Easy numbers. Let me just write £1,000 for easy numbers, okay? 2019 was way stronger than 2026. Now, this number might be 500 quid for these properties because there's so much more competition. There's just so much more competition. It would probably not be best suited to this particular strategy. So I would put it on a longer stay strategy. That's in a different video. That's about how we price and how we do nightly rates and things like that. But back to this story. I had 2 properties. We're averaging at £1,000 a month on a rent-to-rent model. We're not managing them. Someone else is managing them at this stage and taking their cut. I then had one house in Doncaster. Now this baby made some cash. It's a 4-bedroom house with 2 lounges. Yeah, and we made the 1 lounge into a bedroom. So it became 5-bedroom with 8 beds. So most of the rooms had this layout. Okay, that's your lamp, and you've got a person there and a person there, what we would call a twin room. Okay, hotel room, twin room. And you could rent this out or sell these for around £20 per person per night. So 20 times 8 is 160 quid. The nightly rate on this house was 160 quid. We didn't get any leisure bookings in this one because they were all staying for work. So they would often book for £160 a night, if not 140, if not 170, whatever. And they would book it continuously. And we were often making around 4,500 gross. I just remember that number. Let me work out what that is. So if we take 160 and we times it by 30, there's 4,800. Take off the 2 cleans because we would do a clean either every week or every 2 weeks. You're about 4,500 gross, okay? Gross as in after cleans. We always take the cleans out of that. 4,500. I'm going to add this to the gross column. I've got 3 properties and I'm already grossing over £10,000 a month. Don't get me wrong, the net is very different. The net from this, let me just talk to you about numbers. If we gross 4,500, the management would take their 12%, which was 10% plus VAT. Okay, so let's just assume that that's 500 just for easy numbers. That leaves us with 4,000. Yeah, that's paid out to us. Our mortgage on this property was about £250. We bought the property for 90k and we spent something around 25 on it, I think it was 27 actually. So we were all in, again, easy numbers, for about, let me just say 120. And then we got a mortgage for 75% of that value. And then, so we had all of our money locked in. Okay, we had pretty much all of our money locked in. I just remember refinancing after 2 years and pulling that money out because the value went from 90 up to about 150 really, really quickly. And that was because of our good friend, COVID-19. And in September 2019, when we purchased it for 90k, and when we came to refinance it 2 years later, and it was all done and dusted, obviously, we actually could value it way higher than that. But I remember valuing it at 150 because we were like, well, if we value it lower on an inflated market, then I know that if the market goes down, we're kind of cool, we're kind of safe. So we pulled out our money within 2 years on that one. However, back to the numbers, £4,000 after management. Okay, then we had rent and bills. Let's just assume, sorry, not rent and bills, mortgage of 250 plus bills. Let's just assume they're really high. Gas, especially in winter, ridiculous. So 750. This was clearing just over £3,000. Okay, this was clearing just over £3,000 into our bank net. I'm calling that net. It doesn't include salaries. It doesn't include, business expenses from the office, whatever. But it's pretty much net from the property. So now we've got £3,000 from Doncaster, and I've got £2,000 from my 2 flats in Leamington Spa. Now we're up to a point where we're getting £5,000 a month of 3 properties. 2019, remember that. Okay, our deficit started to go down. The credit cards started to get paid down. And this is where we realized, okay, this model is working. Now by, I would say, March, if not April 2020, guess what happened? Lockdown happened. Lockdown, no one can do any business. Everybody has to stay home unless you're in construction. And I took that as a reason to say, well, I'm in construction because I'm staging properties. And I'm also staging properties that can house short stay guests. And those short stay guests could technically be nurses or people that are needing remote isolation. So I didn't stop. I thought, I'm going all in. I'm going all in on this strategy, because once I'd seen that we were up to, so my running total, let me use running total in red, right? Once I'd seen that we were doing these numbers off 3 properties, my brain went wild. And we quickly scaled in 2020 to, I'm going to estimate, to about 8 properties. And it was a mixture of my trusty agent, Michael, in Leamington Spa. He brought me another one, very, very similar to Doncaster. And the rent was, let me just, actually, if I use the number of the house, you're going to get confused. He brought me, I'm going to call it C Terrace, so you don't Google where it is and steal my idea. I'm going to call it C Terrace. And the rent was so cheap. It was about $850. In fact, no, Michael let me know about these guys. He said it's on Gumtree or Facebook Marketplace or something like that. He's like, JP, get in touch with them. So he led me on to it. He didn't want anything for it. I contacted them, and it was 2 brothers, and they were like, it's our family house that we've moved out of. Obviously parents have passed, and we just want $850. This was a 3-bed townhouse with 3 lounges, kind of like a kitchen, big kitchen, and 2 lounges. I turned both lounges into bedrooms. It became a 5-bed overnight. Okay, so this was a big player for us. Again, every property cost me about $7,500 because of the month rent that it now took me. So I'd learnt my lesson from 3 months to 1 month, plus about £5,000-6,000 in stuff to put in it to get it to market. And I had this pattern of getting the property, furnishing it myself, decorating it myself, weekends, daytimes, evenings, whatever. I was still hustling with networking and all of this stuff, but I'd fallen off the wagon a little bit. I've fallen off the wagon because I was just locked in on these numbers. So between property number 1, 2, that is property number 3. Let me do a running log. This one was property number 4. I'm not going to go through each property in order, but we stacked another 2K net. So this one, 850, this would do similar numbers. This would do about 4.5 grand, take off management, leaves 4, take off rent and bills, let's just say 1,500. That would leave us with 2,500. Let's just say 500 we scrapped for expenses, or we put it in a pot, we put it in a maintenance pot and all of that. Because people always go, yes, but what about maintenance? Yeah, you're right. It does bite you in the ass like 1 month out of 6 or something like that. So let's just say we did 2,000 net. Now on 10.5, this one is plus another 4.5. And then the running total is something like 15K, and the running total is 7. Is it making sense? Now, yes, we are spending more money, but this is not a running total because it's getting paid down. Now, it is a running total that is worth it because I know I've put hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of furniture into the properties that we've staged. But by now, I want you to understand, we've only got 4 properties and we're doing £7,000 net a month. And this is where things got exciting. Skip forward for the whole of COVID. I did not have COVID off at all because landlords were coming at us going, oh my God, I can't rent my property out, okay? So they were more responsive to my messages and other people like me, our messages, and I scaled very, very fast. So around March 2020 to let's say March 2021, I don't remember the fluctuations in lockdown, so don't quote me on that, but we must have gone all the way through 8 properties up to about 15 properties in a year. Now, each one, okay, must, on average, I'm just going to very simply average it out, at £1,000. So if I go from 5 all the way to 15, that is another 10 properties, £10,000. Actually, it's going to be £11,000 because another 11 properties. I had 4, I'm adding it up to 15, so another 11 on top of the already 7 is £17,000 a month. And the gross, oh my God, let's just average the gross out at 4. So another 11 is 44,000. And on top of the 15 is 59,000. This is per month. So in a year, we're up at 15 properties. We're still outsourcing the management, by the way. We're doing 59,000 in gross. I'm just doing quick numbers for the sake of this video. we're doing £17,000 net. We're paying down our debts. We are paying out a lot more in furniture. So it is a balance of cash flow, and it's a crazy, crazy world of, oh my God, how many payments in, how many payments out? Now, let me just get rid of this. Now we're in 2021. We've got 15 properties and we're doing £17,000 net, which equates to £59,000 gross. The purpose of this video is how I built my business from 0 to 100K per month. 100K being gross, but what is the net? Well, we're going to find out, okay? 15 properties. I stopped scaling my rent-to-rent business so aggressively, and over the next couple of years, I'm going to say somewhat between, well, let's just say over the next year, between 2021 and 2022, I think I got to about 18 properties. So you can see there's a massive slowdown, because I welcomed this conversation with my accountant called VAT, okay? VAT, and the fact that we had to pay it. And we restructured the entire business, and now we had to go back, and I was in a massive problem because we had to then somehow work out from 2020 when we started, or 2019 to 2022, what's our VAT position? And I was having sleepless nights because the VAT is when you cross 90,000, you are now qualified for VAT, and no one was really talking about this, and I had no clue about it. So I got a really, really good accountant, really expensive accountant, and we started to work through the VAT. We started to restructure the group. We started to figure out what our bill is. We started to save money like you won't believe because we were panicking. We were like, uh-oh, VAT bill. I slowed down. I took on 3 more because the opportunities were so good. I'm just going to use my terminology, which every new property I'm going to say does 4,000 gross. And I'm going to say it does 1,000 net, just for the purpose of this exercise. Some, as you've already seen, do a lot more, and some do slightly less. But just for the purpose of the exercise, I'm going to use these numbers. So 15 to 18 is 3 more properties, which is 12,000 more on there, which would be 71,000. And on here is another 3 grand, is 20,000. So 71,000 in gross, we're almost at 100K. But we're only in 2022. So how do we get there, JP? This is when I incorporated my business. I had this idea. The management company that I was working with, that I was probably their number 1 client just because I was scaling so aggressively, and the quality of our properties were out of this world, okay? They were out of this world compared to what everyone was listing. And the reason is I took so much time and care and effort with the interiors and the layout, and I'd worked out the magic formula that if more beds equals more per person per night than the contractor style houses, I need bigger houses with off-street parking where I can get the twin room layout. Okay, so I'll show you a picture of the twin room layout, and we just doubled down on that strategy. We also doubled down on my other strategy, which is leisure properties in high footfall leisure areas like Bath City Centre, Leeds City Centre, Manchester City Centre, and slightly surrounding areas. And we went bigger properties so that you can get more people in. Again, more heads on beds. But 2022 is when I started PureStay Management, because at this stage, I was worried about the VAT, huge problem. I didn't want to compound that problem anymore, thanks to the British government, and they keep businesses small. I don't know, I want to get into that. Maybe there's another video on that one day. But why did PureStay Management come about? 2 things. 1, I wasn't happy. I was the most difficult client to our existing management company, and I bet I did their head in, but I wanted perfection. So I wasn't happy with the service they were doing. They said to me, we don't care about clients, we care about money. When I say clients, I mean guests. We don't care about guests, we care about money. And that just didn't sit right with me. We're in a hospitality business. So I wasn't happy. And number 2, I was now paying them a lot of money. On 18 properties, they took 10% of the gross number. So that gross is £71,000. So easy maths, 7,100 plus VAT. Okay, now I wasn't at the stage where we could claim the VAT back because the accountants were now dragging their feet trying to work out this. So we were in this sticky situation where I was like, we're paying out 10% of that is 7,1, so 14,2. So we're paying out 8,300 a month in management fees. Okay, absolutely worth it if I didn't have the time. But now I'd slowed this down. I was like, but now I've got the time. Now I could build a better product. So I started PureStay Management. And that's where the rest of the income and the rest of the story goes. Because we went from managing our 18 properties almost overnight. almost overnight. What I did is I then, in my calendar, I'd have a booking like that. I'd then block it out from that day onwards, and I would take, PureStay Management would take over it from that day. And then with the next property, that might actually be blocked out from that date. Okay, so let's say that's the 15th, that's the 30th, that's how your calendar looks. I would block it out and we'd take over. So ad hoc, we just started taking back our properties. And then that's where the real fun and games started happening, because I had to hire staff and a million other problems occurred. I had to hire staff in my team overseas, let's just put VA and UK. And I'd created another problem I haven't even mentioned yet. I had 18 lots of properties. That's 18 lots of electric bills. It's 18 lots of gas bills. Sometimes they're together, sometimes they're not. It's 18 lots of water bills. It's 18 lots of council tax, which then I learned about business rates. What the hell's business rates? If you want to know what business rates is, we'll do another video on that. But I had all of this admin and I was like, what the hell am I going to do here? That's why I hired an office manager. Now I felt like an entrepreneur. Now I felt like I was running a business, because we were transacting around £71,000 a month and we were net £20,000 a month. But we started PureStay Management so I could take back the management of my own properties, which, as we just figured and then rubbed off, I think was 8,300. So let's just add to our net figure 28,300. The gross is the same, but the net is different. In fact, the gross is the same and the net actually gets more efficient, because now we're in charge of not only what we do, we're in charge of our housekeepers. We're in charge of our maintenance. We're in charge of everything. And that was the difference. That's what I wanted. I wanted full control of our quality. Yes, our office expenses started to go up, but I'm not going to, just for the simplicity of this video, I'm not going to take it out of there, because this is net from properties, okay? This is net from properties. How you choose to do this is up to you. If you wanted a full-time job, you could do this yourself, okay? I didn't want a full-time job. Again, I want to grow. As an entrepreneur, I just wanted to grow, 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 grow. Okay, what was the magic that then happened that took us from 18 to where we are today, which is managing 65 properties? Now, I've reduced this number. Let's just say we're in 2026. I've reduced my number from 18 down to about 12. I say about because we've just taken one on and we're probably going to lose another one. So the reasons are, I keep the really, really strong ones. I keep the relationships with landlords that I love, and I let go of any difficult properties that are now in need of real money spending. And I let go of any difficult landlords, any relationships like that. So we've had many over the time. We have got other clients, other properties, other owners that trust PureStay Management with their property, and all as we take is a 15% plus VAT to handle all of the noise for them. Not this noise, this is their responsibility. All of the noise, such as cleaning, maintenance, spot checking, inventory management, bookings, listings, direct bookings, payments. What else do we do? Optimization, pricing, all of that expertise, that's where we come into it. Let me just talk you through the maths here. 65 properties at 15% VAT, just for easy numbers. We make about £500 per property per month. Per property per month, £500. So I'm just going to do very simple maths of 65 times 500. I hope you're following if you're watching this. It's 32,500, okay? It's 32,500. And then of my 12, again, easy numbers. I already get 500 from the management because now I've got two different companies, but I still get my £1,000 rent to rent money. Okay, so I'm going to go £12,000 here. So where are we up to? We're up to 44,500, which is about right. 44,500. This is a net figure into our businesses per month. And the gross, as you can imagine with 65, we use that gross number of £4,000 just for ease. Now what's that give us? 65 times 4,000 is £260,000 of cash into our business that we control every single month. Now don't get me wrong, this number changes a little bit slower than this number. Clients come, clients go, properties change, properties fall off, etc. But the time of recording, these are the numbers we are doing. There is a huge jump from managing my own properties or outsourcing my own properties from when I started with 18 to then bringing that management in-house and doing numbers like this, 28,000, to then growing my management business and lowering my rent-to-rent properties. Why did I lower them? As I said, some relationships fell off. Of course, we've still got the ones we own, so we did end up buying one or two more. And then because I have to pay electric, gas, water, council tax and deal with all the maintenance for these 12, I wanted to keep that somewhat smaller. I thought if I keep growing that, I'm exponentially creating more problems. So management, all in, generates us gross 260. I wanted to talk how I built my entire business from 0 to 100K plus per calendar month, but it's actually at 260,000, okay? We take home, before staff, before expenses, before tax, 44,500 a month into our business just from Airbnb. The pain that I've gone through the last 7 years to get to this stage, the growth, the problems, the faults, all of that issue, all comes down to this mindset shift. I had a target, and my target was, I want to create a business as an entrepreneur. I want to create something that gives me opportunity. And trust me, when you've got this amount of money, even if it was less, even if you chop it in not quite in half, even if it's that much, you've got a lot of power, you've got a lot of control, you've got a lot of options. Now, the final bit I want to talk about, and there will be a whole new video on this, is out of this much, which remember is 260, but I've just made it 160 just for the sake of it. Out of that much, there's a lot of commission paid to things like Booking.com, Airbnb. They usually take somewhat between 15 to 18% inclusive of that. That's a big number. There are other ways in Airbnb to make money, other ways in property to make money by direct bookings. And we now take a commission on our direct bookings agency. So we've created a direct bookings agency where we take somewhere around 10% for direct bookings. So there are revenue streams everywhere. And this is how you grow without necessarily buying any properties. Don't forget, I now own Doncaster, and at this stage, we own two others. Okay, two others, which is 3 in total. Okay, one of which I've just moved from Airbnb model to AST model because it just wasn't that profitable. There are options. And what I want you to understand is when you get to this stage, you have been on one hell of a ride. So either do it alone, like 7 years worth, like I did from 2019 to 2026, hit a million problems. But as long as you've got a strong mindset, that's what I knew I had. I'd paid a lot of money out during this time in coaching. I had business coaches, I had one-to-one coaches, I had group coaching, all of that stuff. I probably spent close to £75,000 myself on coaching. And that's what allowed me to get through all of this noise. I didn't talk too much about the 4 years in between because it was just rinse and repeat. It was rinse and repeat, or should I say with PureStay Management, it was just building infrastructure. That's now what we teach in the host network. But that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. How I built my entire business from 0 to 100K per calendar month by going through a million problems and just taking action and getting to today's number, which is 260,000. More importantly, what comes into our business net of all cost and payout to client is about £44,500. So there you have it. I'll see you in the next video.